Welcome to Vegan Middle East. Today we are making Ekmek Kataifi. This dessert is made up of 3 layers: shredded phyllo pastry soaked in sweetly spiced syrup, underneath a layer of smooth custard, topped with whipped cream, pistachios and cinnamon. It is typically served in Greek culture at weddings or at parties around Easter. Ekmek is actually the Turkish word for bread, and this dessert is very similar to the Turkish version of bread soaked in syrup and topped with cream. If you are interested in the cultural history of Ekmek Kataifi, visit veganmiddleeast.com. So the ingredients include the kataifi, the shredded pastry, and the margarine. This is the first layer. On the second layer we are doing custard, so you can either use bird's custard, which is vegan, and you can just use a plant milk with that, or you can make your own custard using plant milk, corn flour, icing sugar and vanilla. Next we've got the cream. So I'm using Elmley double plant cream, which is great for whipping up. If you don't have this, you can use aquafaba, the water from a can of beans. There's lots of recipes online to show you how to make this into cream. Spray cans of whipped cream are also usually vegan. For the syrup, we need caster sugar, maple syrup, or you can use agave syrup or vegan apple honey, lemon and cinnamon sticks. Finally, for the garnish, we've got pistachios and cinnamon. Kataifi, or shredded phyllo pastry, can be bought frozen from international food shops. When you're cooking with kataifi, allow it time to defrost either at room temperature or in the fridge first. Once the packet is open, use a damp tea towel to keep it from drying out. Mine is a little bit too dry, and that's why you can see it breaking up quite easily. Separate the pastry strands, being careful not to break them. You can just pull them apart gently with your fingers. It does take a little bit of time, but it is worth it. Now the pastry is light and separated and ready to work with. Melt the vegan margarine in the microwave using short bursts. It took me about 45 seconds to get melted margarine. Cover the base and the sides of a deep baking tray using a little of the margarine. Lay the pastry in the tray, making sure all the corners are filled, and tuck in any loose strands. You don't need to press it down too much though, it can be a little bit voluminous. Spoon the rest of the melted margarine across the pastry. Make sure it's spread evenly. Then bake for 1 hour at 160 degrees Celsius until it is crisp and golden. While the pastry bakes, put all the syrup ingredients in a pan. Bring to the boil, stirring slowly until the sugar dissolves. Leave on a medium heat to simmer for 3 minutes, then let cool. The syrup must be cold when the pastry comes out of the oven, and you can put it in the fridge if it helps it cool down quicker. Once the pastry is baked, remove from the oven and immediately pour the cold syrup all over it. Remove the lemon, cinnamon and cloves. Now it's time to make the vegan custard. Put the cornstarch in a pan and then sieve in the icing sugar. My top tip for sieving is to use a spoon, avoiding mess and avoiding the sugar going into the air. Add a little plant milk and mix well until there are no lumps left. I spent about 5 minutes at this stage, but it's really worth making sure it's not lumpy at all because you don't want lumpy custard. Gradually add in the rest of the plant milk, mixing as you go, and then also add in the vanilla extract. Cook on low heat and keep whisking to avoid any lumps from forming. Be careful the cornstarch doesn't stick on the base of the pan. Just before it begins to boil, the custard should thicken quickly. You can stir for a minute longer just to make sure that the whole custard is thick throughout, and then turn it off the heat before it boils. This custard is thicker than one you would make for a normal dessert because it's got to stand on top of the pastry and hold up the cream. If your custard is too thick to pour, that's good, and you can place it straight onto the pastry. If it is a little too thin to sit without dripping down into the pastry, then you can wait for it to cool slightly first and it should get thicker. With the pastry still in the deep tray, smooth the custard right across the pastry. Place a sheet of cling film across the top of the custard to prevent it from forming a skin. Leave in the fridge for 2 to 3 hours. The custard must be cold or room temperature when you add the cream, otherwise the cream will melt. Pour the cream into a mixing bowl and sieve in the icing sugar. Whip up with a handheld or electronic whisk until stiff peaks form. Chop or crush the nuts into small pieces and mix in the cinnamon. I'm using pistachio nuts, but you could also use walnuts. Remove the cling film from the custard. Spread the cream across the custard and gently smooth out the top. Finally, sprinkle the nuts on top. You can keep vegan Ekmek Kataifi in the fridge for up to a week, but this is such a tasty dessert, and if you're in a house like mine, it will be gone in 1 or 2 days. Serve in small squares. You should be able to get between 12 and 16 squares per pan. I hope you enjoy making and eating this dessert. It's certainly a showstopper. For the full recipe, visit veganmiddleeast.com. If you have any questions, just comment below.